Good morning, Tampa Bay. What is going on? Happy Friday edition. Channelside in the morning, live on the Channelside Sports Network. Thank you for those who are tuned in. We're going completely off the cuff today. I didn't write anything. I took no notes. I didn't do any of it. Because you know what? Sometimes that's the best way. Sometimes that's the best. That's the best that you can do. You know, we've talked all week. We've talked all week about Buccaneers and the Steelers. Obviously, that's probably our biggest talking point, right? That's probably the biggest talking point for the entire week. I mean, hockey season just started. Of course, we've got the Tampa Bay Lightning are in Columbus tonight against the Blue Jackets. The Orlando Magic wrap up their preseason at home against the Cleveland Cavaliers. You know, and we're looking at so many great things as we head in. You know, obviously the regular season for the NHL has started. This is what we've been waiting for as hockey fans. We've been waiting for this, and it doesn't seem like it was that long ago that the hockey season ended. You know, we're just talking about a few months, really. Like it wasn't that long ago. You know, John Cooper talked about that at the end of game one. You know, it wasn't that long ago. You know, and you still have to remember that the mileage is still adding up for the Tampa Bay Lightning. That they're still accruing those miles. They have still played more hockey than any other team in the NHL. They played almost the entire maximum amount of games you could play in a season last year. Just imagine if the Panthers series wasn't a sweep and it went to 7 games. We're then looking at a team that's like, I mean, that's a lot of hockey being played. So they're going to come out of the gate and they're probably going to look a little sluggish. And that's what I expect from the Tampa Bay Lightning. I expect them to I don't want to say limp through the season because I feel like that's doing them an injustice. But I do think that we see the Tampa Bay Lightning kind of just play to get into the playoffs. I don't think they're playing for the President's Trophy. I don't think that they're playing to, you know, get first place in the Atlantic Division. Although that might end up becoming the President's Trophy anyway, with as difficult as the division is. But nonetheless, I don't think that that's what the Lightning are playing for. I think the Lightning are playing just to get into the playoffs and then turn it on. You know, Henry and I talked about at the beginning of the week before the regular season started. I think we see a hell of a lot more of Brian Elliott in the regular season this year. To keep Andre Vasilevsky healthy and kind of fresh going into the playoffs, because when Vazzy's on, and there's nobody that's even close to matching what Andre Vasilevsky can do. Igor Shesterkin, great goalie. Don't get me wrong. I'm not knocking Igor. Igor's a good goalie, but he's not Andre Vasilevsky. He's not as good as Vazzy is. He's close, but he's not quite there yet. And we can't compare the resumes. I mean, the resumes it's insurmountable in favor of Vazzy. So we can't compare the resumes between the two. It's just it's not something that we're able to do. But I think we're looking at a Tampa Bay Lightning team that may annoy fans during the regular season. And I say annoy fans because I feel like we're going to see a Tampa Bay Lightning team that is kind of slow and methodical as they work their way through the regular season. That's what I envision for this Lightning team. Going throughout this entire 2022-23 season is just a slow, methodical, you know, kind of like a tortoise in the hare race, that kind of thing. That's what I'm envisioning for the Lightning. And I think that, you know, we might see bursts. We might see a few winning streaks. We might see a few losing streaks. Just, it happens. It's a long season. 82 games is a long time. You thought, I don't want to say not every game matters when you're in, the NBA or you're in the NHL or you're in Major League Baseball. But like Major League Baseball is it's double. Major League Baseball is entirely too long. There are too many games in baseball that truly do not matter. We can look at the standings at the end of the regular season in baseball and go, but yeah, they're only separated by 3 games. Right, but they could have been separated by 3 games if they played 80. Right? Like, well, this team caught fire in September. They could have caught fire. They could have still caught fire in September had the season started in May. It's things like that to where, that's where it's, for me, it's hard to say, every game in baseball matters. You do wind down a little bit in terms of saying, like every game in basketball and in hockey matters. Not necessarily. You never really see everything too close. Obviously, football, every game matters. There's only 17 of them. There's only 17 games, and that's what makes it more difficult in the regular season and makes every game that much more meaningful because there's just less of them. The hockey season is very long. 82 games is a hell of a long time. NBA season, hell of a long game. And it's, you obviously want to see your team do as good as they possibly can, right? Like that's, I don't think anybody is going to argue that or refute that or, kind of work against that. But, if we're being realistic, not every game truly matters in the regular season. Can we be honest about that? Not every game truly matters. But it's, I don't know. I just feel like we put so much effort and we put so much emphasis on the beginning of seasons for these. You want to see your team come out and you want to see your team start off hot. I get it. As sports fans, that's what we want. I want the Tampa Bay Lightning to come out 5-0. I want the Orlando Magic to come out 5-0. I want the Bucks to, start this gauntlet of a season. I want them to start 4-0 against that's the hardest point of their schedule. I want them to just rip through everybody because we then expect them to beat the Falcons. We expect them to beat the Steelers and the Seahawks and maybe the 49ers. But like you have all of these expectations as you head into the season and is it like that you have that narrative of don't panic. People are panicking. They lost the game. You can't say you can't tell somebody like, oh, you can't panic, because having a realistic concern is not a panic, right? And it's like preparing for a hurricane, right? You go to the store, and there's people buying 700 cases of water. They're buying all the canned food. And you're like, yeah, I'd like to get a case of water and, maybe some canned food in case we lose power for a little bit. But, that's the extent of it for me. That doesn't mean that you're panicking. You're just well prepared. Similarly, as a sports fan, right? If the Buccaneers go 2-2 through the first 4 games, and you're like, hey, we noticed there's some issues. There's some issues, and people go, oh my God, it's only 4 weeks in, you're panicking. Like, when do games matter to you? When do games start mattering to you? In a 17-game season, every single game matters. In an 82-game season, not so much, but we would still like to see the Lightning, the Magic. We'd like to see those teams on the winning end more often than on the losing end, especially to start the season, because at the beginning of the season, you have the most attention in baseball, basketball, and in hockey at the beginning of the season and at the end of the season. The middle of the season is kind of where you have that lull period, right? Especially in baseball. The summer months in baseball, I mean, it's virtually a ghost town everywhere, not just the Trop, right? I mean, that's where you have to look at it and say, okay, yeah, am I being realistic? I think we're being very realistic about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers when you go, yeah, we have concerns. Yeah, but they're 3-2, but they're an ugly 3-2, right? This team should be a shining star at 3-2 and got beat by a Kansas City Chiefs team who is way better than anybody thought and clearly the second favorite to go to the Super Bowl in the AFC. Clearly behind the Buffalo Bills. And you know what? Then they lose by 2 to the Green Bay Packers. The Packers are an NFC Super Bowl contending team. I don't believe they are, but everybody else in the world believes they are because Aaron Rodgers is good, because Matt LaFleur is good. What the problem is in those 2 games, the Buccaneers looked really bad. Against the New Orleans Saints, Buccaneers didn't look that good. They got the dub, but they didn't look that good. Come out against Atlanta. All right, here we go. Tune-up game. Don't look that good. Get the win, but they don't look that good. It's a natural human reaction and a natural human emotion to have concern. Now, if you're one of those guys going, oh my God, we signed Julio, waste of money. We signed Akeem Hicks, he's a waste of money. We signed this guy, he's a waste of money. Yada, yada, yada. Now you're just going over the top and you're just looking for reasons to piss and moan. There's no realistic reason why you should not have some sort of concern. I've said it all week. I said it before the season started. I'll say it again right now. This is the last show before the game. This is a very dangerous game for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. What they should do is come out and absolutely demolish the reeling 1-4 Pittsburgh Steelers, who have arguably the worst offensive coordinator in the NFL in Matt Canada. They've got one of the best head coaches in Mike Tomlin, but the offense, until somebody else starts calling the offense, is a non-factor for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Evan with Channelside Bets just put out his starts and sits yesterday. Najee Harris is listed as a sit. The Buccaneers have a very, very good defense. Have they put it together at both levels? The last couple of weeks, they haven't, but we've seen how dominant the Buccaneers defense can be. We've seen it already this season. They held the Cowboys to 3 points. The Cowboys have only lost 1 game. I don't care about the schedule. You play who you're scheduled to play, period. That doesn't matter to me. Whoever's on your schedule, I don't care. Last year the Carolina Panthers defense came out through the first 6 games and looked fantastic. And you're going, wow, the Carolina Panthers have a very solid defense. And look who they've played. They played the Cardinals, and the Cardinals went to the playoffs. Completely choked in the playoffs, but they went to the playoffs. Like, you play who you're scheduled to play. If we start saying that, this game doesn't count because they played this team. That game doesn't count because they played this team. But this game doesn't count because it's only the second game of the season. Like, at what point does it start mattering? Right? If these things did not matter, they wouldn't track stats. If these didn't matter, they wouldn't track wins and losses. And they'd say, all right, 17-game season, 12 matter. Okay, so 5 preseason games. Got it. That's what you're telling me when you say, well, these games don't matter. So don't tell me that games don't matter, because everyone, especially in the NFL season, does. If we go over to the Orlando Magic side, there's 82 games. All 82 games matter, but it's relative, right? All 82 games matter. But it depends on where they are. If the Magic come out of the gate and they start, and I'm not trying to wish bad juju on them, but we also have to be realistic. Let's say the Orlando Magic come out of the gate and they're like 0-8. The rest of those games 100% matter because you need to figure it out. Otherwise, you're not going to make the playoffs. When does the NBA season start mattering to you? When does the NHL season start mattering to you? I know it's a long game. We know it's a long game. And that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of, especially when you've got a seasoned team like the Lightning. That's the beauty of it. These guys come in and they know what they're doing. NHL postseason, beautiful. Let's get the beards going. And now let's turn it on. Let's take that to the next level. I don't see any reason why we say certain games do not matter. Baseball, I'm 100% on board with you. 160 plus games, I'm totally on board with you. I think baseball is entirely too long. I don't feel like the baseball season needs to be as long as it is. I think that if they shorten the season, you now increase attendance. I think you increase interest. And I get that, it's America's pastime. I think America's pastime is past its time. I think that is fully transitioned to the NFL. I guess it's a cute tagline for baseball, but I think baseball's time has been up for quite some time. You could have argued during the Kaepernick and the anthem thing that the NFL lost traction. I know so many people would post ironically on in NFL social media groups that they're not watching the NFL anymore, but you're still in an NFL centric group following and talking and doing all of these things. But there was a time where you could possibly argue that the NFL wasn't as popular, where it lost a little bit of traction. We saw TV ratings go down, etc., but it's back. I think the biggest thing for me in terms of the popularity is that baseball is just too long. I am super happy. I'm not a fan of the commentary team, namely Sean McDonough on ESPN. I think TNT does a fantastic job. But I think the NHL getting on TNT and ESPN for that matter is huge. Growing up in Detroit, that was all that we had for the longest time to be proud of was the Detroit Red Wings. That's all that we had to be proud of in sports. Until the Pistons came in, in the late 2000s, until the Pistons started running the Eastern Conference of the NBA. But the NHL had their lockout. They've had so many poor multimedia television deals that, coming back to ESPN was the best. I loved the NBC broadcasts, but ESPN to me has really put an emphasis on the importance of the NHL and the importance of hockey as a sport. We know basketball is a beloved sport. Basketball fans are arguably the most rabid fans out of all of our professional sports. Basketball fans will literally fight you on social media and possibly in real life to the death to defend their favorite player, to defend their favorite team. We kind of have that in the NFL, but it's mainly for division rivals, right? How many times do you see Bucks and Saints fans? I guess maybe only Bucks and Saints because the other, the Falcons are rebuilding and the Carolina Panthers are a null and void team currently at this point. But, NBA fans are very rabid. They're going to tune in all the time. They're like rabid Wolverines. Shout out to Corey for that comment. But they are, and that's what makes it fun. The passion that they have behind being a fan, the passion that they have. The NHL doesn't really have that. The NHL has that in certain markets, like our market here in Tampa. We've got a very, very passionate fan base. I know I've talked about that a lot. I was at every event that the Tampa Bay Lightning, when we launched in May, every event that the Tampa Bay Lightning held, whether it was watch parties, the bike-a-thon, all of these, I was part of that. And talking to so many fans that are, from New York, that are Knicks fans and Giants fans, but they're Lightning fans. They're not Rangers fans, they're not Islander fans, but they're Lightning fans because the culture, right? And I think that, to me, that's what Jeff Vinik created in Tampa, is he created a culture. Adding all of the winning on top of that culture, I mean, that's the icing on the cake. But he built that from the ground up. If other hockey owners, and we're just going to stick with hockey here for a minute, if other hockey owners did the same thing, I think then we're talking about hockey fans becoming just as passionate as NFL and as NBA fans. Like I said, NBA fans are on a different level. I've spoken to enough NBA fans over and just sat back and, kind of posted the popcorn eating GIF files. Just like read the comments and enjoyed watching people just go back and forth and back and forth. And, you don't get that in hockey until it's playoffs. We all know that hockey playoffs are probably the best playoffs out of all professional sports. I think, if you're a fan of all of our professional sports, I think that we can all kind of agree that there is nothing like the NHL playoffs. I know so many more just Lightning fans in general that will watch the Lightning game, and then whatever Western Conference team is on after that, they'll stay up and they'll watch that as well. Because the hockey playoffs are so damn interesting and they're so damn fun. I think that ESPN taking over is the right move for the NHL because it puts them back in the public eye. Because when NBC owned the rights to the NHL, it wasn't very often where we would see NHL games actually on NBC. They were mainly on the NBC Sports Network. They were maybe on NBCSN. And they just weren't on, they weren't regularly broadcasted. And some of the games that they had, you were like, oh, so we're going to watch the Ducks and the Red Wings. But neither of these teams are good. Why is this the broadcast? Like, you know what I mean? Like, to me, that's crazy. I guess we did have to watch the Commanders and the Bears last night. But to be fair, I don't know if Amazon... I think Amazon just took that one on the chin. We're like, I guess we'll have that game. But yeah, the NHL being on ESPN, I think, is great. I think that's going to help put more eyes on it. I think that's just going to elevate it. Unfortunately, for the broadcast team, it has put more eyes on it in like a WTF moment. But maybe that changes down the road. Maybe that honestly does change. We have to remember that, Ray Ferraro is not a regular commentator. Sean McDonough was not a regular commentator. I think Emily Kaplan is great. I know a lot of people get on her about, some of the questions, but you have to realize is when you're on television, you're being told what you need to ask. If you've read any of her content over the years, a lot of the questions that she asks, they're not typical of Emily Kaplan and her knowledge base of professional sports and professional hockey in general. Like, that's just not something that it is. We're in a very different era where even these national broadcasts, and we see it all the time, These national broadcasts are after social media clicks. They're after the clickbait. How many times are we going to watch videos of Shannon Sharp and Skip Bayless debating about the same exact topic over and over and over? How many times are we going to watch Stephen A. Smith stare into his camera and scream into the microphone over and over and over? It's the formula nowadays. The formula is to get clicks. And that's what happens with when Pam Oliver or Aaron Andrews or Emily Kaplan or not Michelle Tafoya anymore. But that when all of these sideline reporters are asking questions, or these backstage reporters are asking questions, they're asking questions to get viral answers. That's the name of the game in broadcasting. So if you're not educated on understanding where, we're trending as a broadcasting, as a connected world, I understand where you go, geez, Emily Kaplan's terrible. She doesn't know, what kind of questions is she asking? She said, well, I just told you why she's asking those questions, because that's what they need to be asking. They need to be asking the stuff that's going to get 1 million shares. It is what it is. That's the world that we live in now. Why do you think Nick Wright only talks about LeBron James? Because LeBron James fans are bananas. LeBron James fans are the reason why people don't really like LeBron James. Nobody hates LeBron James the person, right? LeBron James the person opened up a school. LeBron James the person is a great father. LeBron James the person is a great competitor. LeBron James, a basketball player, is arguably one of the greatest basketball players, but it's because of his fan base, which is absolutely insane. That's why people go, yeah, LeBron's not that good. I don't like LeBron. I'm tired of LeBron. He's been shoved down my throat, whatever. A lot of the talking point is, why are you trying to validate still 20 years into his career? Why are you still trying to validate him against Michael Jordan? Let his record speak for himself. And what I tell people, you can like both. I don't know if you know that. You're allowed to like Michael Jordan and LeBron James. It's called being a basketball fan. That's what it is. You're allowed to like both. If you're a basketball fan, and that's why I love covering sports. That's why I love the pick'ems. That's why I love Thursday shows during the NFL regular season, because I love football. I like talking about all the teams. I follow every team. I like talking about all the teams, and that's what makes fandom great, is when you can communicate and you can effectively communicate with fans of the sport. Because if you talk to a Buccaneers fan and say, yeah, well, and just a Buccaneers fan, not an NFL fan whose favorite team is the Buccaneers, but if you talk to somebody who's just solely a fan of this team and they hate every other team, or they don't care about every other team, and you're like, man, 3-2 going on the road against the 1-4 Steelers, what is the general reaction you're going to get? Why are you even concerned about this game? You shouldn't be concerned. They're 1-4. But why are they 1-4? You don't follow the team. Who's on their roster? You don't follow the team. How good is their defensive line? How poorly has our offensive line played? There's factors that are involved in this. And that's why I love following Pro Football Focus. I love the stats and the analytics behind the game, because all of that stuff matters to the game. It's a shame that we don't have that for hockey, where we don't have a plethora of statistical analysis for each game. time in the offensive zone is not even tracked by anybody for the NHL. Like, to me that's freaking weird. Why is that not a measured category? They'll show it on TV, but unless you're starting it and stopping it on a stopwatch, you're never going to know how long the puck was in the offensive zone. Like, there's certain things, ESPN does a great job of showing that, but they don't track it because that's not a tracked category. We don't have those things. I think that if you start implementing the type of coverage that we have, right? If you start implementing the type of coverage that we have for the NFL into the other sports, like, we don't have a lot of the same tracking in the NBA that we do for the NFL. We've got a lot of metrics in the NBA, but it's still not up to the point of the NFL. We know that the NFL runs the world. I mean, let's be completely realistic here. In terms of the sports world, the NFL runs the world. The NFL season is 18 weeks. Then we go to the postseason, and then we talk about the postseason after the Super Bowl, and then we look ahead to the draft for 2 months and talk about the draft every single day. And then the draft happens, and then we analyze the draft for a month, and then we talk about free agency. Oh, and look, now there's training camp. The NFL runs the sports world because they have effectively created a 12-month domination of your calendar. The NHL offseason, relatively boring. NBA offseason, relatively boring. We're probably not going to hear anything about baseball until pitchers and catchers have to report. At least down here in Tampa, because the Rays are out. Right? Like, that's... if you're trying to grow your sport, you have to make fans want to be involved. Right? Like, we have to make fans want more. I know I want, when I watch the Lightning, I want as much statistical analysis as I can possibly get throughout the game. Shayna with The Athletic, fantastic at covering, but she too doesn't have access to things that aren't statistically measured, right? If it's not measured, we don't have access to it unless somebody's sitting at home like an old-timey professional wrestling writer that's going, well, that match was 24 minutes and 13 seconds bell to bell. We don't have that. ESPN does a great job tracking every possible thing. And then you add on Pro Football Focus on top of that. And now you have created a passionate fan base who is also pretty well informed, unless they're just a fan of a certain team. And then that's when you start having those conversations of, why are you worried about the Steelers? They're 1-4. I've told you all week why I'm worried about the Steelers. I've told you all week. I'm very worried about the Pittsburgh Steelers because the Pittsburgh Steelers are not a true 1-4 team. That's why I'm worried about the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm worried about the Pittsburgh Steelers because our offensive line is not playing very well, and their defensive line is great. Cameron Hayward lining up against Luke Gedeke, tell me how that's going to work. Right? Like, tell me, how does that work? How is that going to work out for our struggling rookie, Luke Gedeke, lining up across from Cam Hayward? We're going to see a lot of Leonard Fournette and Rashad White and an extra tight end chipping over to help and give Tom Brady a cleaner pocket. We've seen the offensive line. They did improve last week. Tom Brady went from having the lowest time to throw average to third. right? Like, they have improved. It's the small wins you have to look at. But the Steelers, if you're only looking at the Pittsburgh Steelers and you're only looking at their record and saying, hey, they're 1-4, I'm not worried. You're going to be in for a rude awakening, my friend. You're going to be in for a rude awakening because you're only looking at the record. Luke Gedeke is literally dead last in terms of offensive line rankings. And it's not because he's a terrible player. It's because he was not prepared for Aaron Stinney to go down. Right? He's a rookie. And then look at who he's had to line up against. And it's not going to be any easier on Sunday. It arguably might be the most difficult matchup he's had in these first 6 weeks. And you wonder why I'm worried about the Pittsburgh Steelers? Who do the Pittsburgh Steelers have on offense? They have Deontay Johnson. They have George Pickens. They have Najee Harris. They have Chase Claypool. Claypool has all of the physical attributes to be a superstar in this league. He does not have his mind right. Mitchell Trubisky, not a bad quarterback. I know he got pulled out because they're trying to do something with that offense without realistically looking and going, yeah, it's the coordinator. Matt Canada needs to go. Kenny Pickett is going to be a good quarterback. We've seen flashes from Kenny Pickett this season since he took over. Of like, okay, yeah, this kid gets it. And you wonder why I'm worried about the Pittsburgh Steelers. Our rushing defense has kind of fallen off the face of the earth over these last couple of weeks. And now you've got Najee Harris, he's a bulldozer. And he's very sure-handed. You know, we need to focus more on wrapping Najee Harris up than trying to peanut punch the ball out of his hands, right? Like, this is why I am concerned about the Pittsburgh Steelers, because they are not a 1-4 team that sucks. They are a shocking 1-4 team. They are a dangerous 1-4 team because they shouldn't be 1-4. You think Mike Tomlin, who is the winningest coach in the first 15 years of his NFL career, isn't going to have those troops rallied to knock off the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to show the world, yeah, we're not a 1-4 team, guys. You don't think he's going to have those guys ready? Of course, we're doing all of our due diligence down here in Tampa. We're getting prepared. But this is going to be this is why I picked at the beginning of the year, before we knew any of the struggles that the Bucs were going to have offensively. Before we knew that Matt Canada still had no idea what he was doing as an offensive coordinator for the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is why I picked the Steelers to upset the Tampa Bay Buccaneers before the season started as my ultimate trap game. Because everybody's overlooking the Pittsburgh Steelers. People were overlooking the Falcons, and the Falcons played very good against us. But the Falcons are rebuilding. The Steelers aren't rebuilding. They just lost Ben Roethlisberger. I know those are huge shoes to fill. I understand that. But they got a serviceable quarterback in Mitchell Trubisky. They drafted a very capable and a very good rookie in Kenny Pickett. And that's the only thing that changed. I know the quarterback changing is a huge thing, and you go from a Hall of Famer in Ben Roethlisberger to, Mitchell Trubisky, who was the backup for Buffalo after getting let go from the Chicago Bears. You got to remember, Mitchell Trubisky was a Pro Bowl quarterback in Chicago before Matt Nagy figured out how to sabotage that entire team and make everybody look incompetent. You have to remember that. And then he sat behind Josh Allen, and he watched Josh Allen set the league on fire. He learned from Josh Allen. He learned from Sean McDermott. And now you're putting him into a system where he's got very capable wide receivers. He's got a great running back. He's got a good offensive line, and he's got a solid defense. What happens? Just doesn't really click. Throw in Kenny Pickett, doesn't really click. You have to look at your offensive coordinator like that. Eventually, it's either going to click or they're going to replace him. But the Pittsburgh Steelers, that's why they're 1-4. The Pittsburgh Steelers are not 1-4 because they're bad. And that's what makes it scary. They're not rebuilding. The Falcons are rebuilding. That's why people overlooked them. There was no coverage of what was happening in Atlanta. How many people realistically outside of Buccaneers fans, and I know most of you watching this are Buccaneers fans, and I expect a lot of you to know this, right? But outside of Buccaneers fans, how many people do you think knew that Kyle Pitts wasn't playing? If you don't play fantasy football and you're not a Buccaneers fan or a Falcons fan, how many people around the league knew that Atlanta superstar tight end was not going to play until Jay Glazer told you pregame during his ins and outs segment? How many people do you think actually knew that? The Atlanta Falcons don't have much media coverage. The Pittsburgh Steelers, on the other hand, they're all over the media. They're one of the storied franchises of the NFL. So tell me that they're not going to be ready for our Buccaneers. The Bucs are favored by 9.5. Like that. Realistically, the Buccaneers should go in there and they should pick up a very convincing win. But we should have had a very convincing win over the Atlanta Falcons, who are rebuilding, who didn't have Kyle Pitts, who don't have Cordero Patterson. We should have wiped the floor with the Atlanta Falcons, and we won by 6 points. That's what makes me concerned about playing against the Pittsburgh Steelers on Sunday. I agree. Jay in the chat says 9.5 is way too many points, and I totally agree. The Pittsburgh Steelers have better skill position players. They arguably, even if Cordero Patterson is playing for the Falcons, Pittsburgh still has a better running game than Atlanta. They've got a better offensive line. They've got a better defense. 9.5 is a huge spread. It's the second most of the entire week behind the Rams and Panthers. And the Rams and Panthers, that 10.5 points between those two, sure. I understand why. Panthers are atrocious, and Baker Mayfield's gone. But Baker Mayfield also has the second worst passer rating in NFL history since they stopped since they started counting and tracking the passer rating in 2006. The Bucs have stopped. They've struggled stopping the run. We talked about it. We talked about it on Monday on the recap show of the Bucs and Falcons game. They gave up over 150 yards on the ground. Algier looked solid. Mariota burned them. Pittsburgh's got two quarterbacks that can scramble. Pickett's in line to start, but for some reason, if Pickett goes down, Mitchell Trubisky is just as dangerous with his legs as Kenny Pickett is. So pardon me, because I watch all of these guys and I dissect I dissect as much film as I possibly can. But this is why I'm worried about playing the Pittsburgh Steelers. I was worried about the Steelers, like I said, before we knew any of the struggles that we were going to have on offense, on defense. We know that the defense is very good. We know that our Buccaneers defense is very, very good, but they've just had a couple of bad days at the office, and I'm sure they're going to get the ship right. The offense as a whole, and I know Tom Brady is third overall in passing yards. I get it. But again, just like the 3-2 record, it's an ugly third overall in passing yards. because he doesn't have a clean pocket. They've abandoned the run for the most part. Leonard Fournette had 28 yards going into the fourth quarter. Leonard Fournette, it's not like, it's not like it's some bum off the street or some, 6th round draft pick that was filling in because all of the other guys above him and the depth chart got injured. It's Leonard Fournette, who's completely been a non-factor in the running game this season, outside of the first game against the Dallas Cowboys, when you're like, oh yeah, Lenny broke the century mark. This is going to be a great season for Leonard. We thought Tom Brady was going to destroy Peyton Manning's touchdown passing record this season. It's not going to happen. Unless we get a couple, 8 touchdown games from Tom Brady. This isn't college football. That's not going to happen. Is Tom Brady going to lead the league in passing? I think he'll finish second in the league in passing behind Josh Allen. I want to see Tom Brady. To me, Tom looks a little sluggish and a little out of it, but he still relatively looks like Tom Brady, right? He still looks like the Tom Brady that we know. He's still got the zip on the ball. He's still, moving around in the pocket. He's still got his eyes down the field. The problem has been for the first 4 games at least is he's had progression 1, progression 2. Got to get the ball out now. I can't go to 3 or 4. I have to go to 1 or 2, and I have to get the ball out because I don't have the protection. The Falcons come to town. They protect a little bit better. He can go 1, 2, 3, sometimes 4. I mean, you can watch the game film if you get an NFL Plus account. You can watch the game film, and you can watch where Brady's head is turning, right? You can watch, and you can see it and go, wow. So he only got to his second progression there. This is why I'm worried about the Pittsburgh Steelers, guys, because that defensive line is a force. Cameron Hayward is going to have a field day against Luke Gedeke. And again, it's not because Luke Gedeke is an inferior football player. It's not because he's a bad football player. Luke Gedeke is look. You got to remember, as a rookie, if you're not performing well as a rookie, and you're competitive by nature, if you're not performing well, you are not in the right frame of mind. Especially heading into your 6th game as a starter, knowing that you are dead last in your, not just your position, but in every offensive line position. When you put all of their stats together, Gedeke is last. He's not in, you can't tell me he's in the right frame of mind right now, that he's not frustrated, that he's not going to try and overcorrect. But now but this is the problem. Now he's got Cam Hayward. You've got no time to overcorrect. You can't overcorrect because Cam Hayward is going to run right through you if you do. This is where it's. Like I said, this is why I'm worried about the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think any realistic fan is worried about the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Falcons were supposed to be the get-right game. It wasn't quite the get-right game, but it was a little better, right? I mean, if we go through the rushing yardage, and we'll start there. We've got 9 minutes remaining. If we go through the rushing yardage for the Bucs, we've had 152, 72, 34, 3, and 69. We had 34 rush yards against the Green Bay Packers, who were torched just a week before against by the Chicago Bears. 34 rushing yards against the Green Bay Packers. And then 3 against the Chiefs. completely abandoned the run, and had 3 rushing yards. We had 69 total rushing yards against the Atlanta Falcons. Passing yards, a little bit of a different story. 195, 188, 251, 373, 351. 373 passing yards for the Bucs against the Chiefs is largely in part due to the fact that it was a blowout. That was largely the reason why Tom Brady had nearly 400 passing yards, because it was a blowout. They're trying to play catch up. They're trying to get back. 351 against the Falcons was promising. He struggled to connect with Mike Evans. They only connected on 50% of their targets. And Mike Evans still had a good day. Chris Godwin caught 6 of 6, I believe is what it was. Cade Otton caught 6 of 7. Rashad White caught 3 of 4, and Leonard Fournette caught 10 of 11. Arguably the check down is what was working. Well, you do a little pick up the blitzer, and then you roll out if you're the running back. Check down is there. It happens. We've seen Tom Brady do it time and time again with James White while they were in New England. Atlanta should have been the get-right game. Pittsburgh could be a get-right game, but that's one that I think is going to be closer than a lot of people think. Then you've got Week 7 in Carolina. If that's not the get-right game, and we come out of that game not looking great and barely getting by the Carolina Panthers, now I'm concerned, because the Carolina Panthers are 1-4, and they're an awful 1-4. It's not like they're 1-4 because things weren't working. It's not like they're 1-4 because they were just losing at the end. Like, I know they just lost at the end against the Cleveland Browns. I get that. But the Carolina Panthers are not a good team. That's why they're 1-4. The Pittsburgh Steelers are a good team that happen to be 1-4. Just like the Rams, a good team, but they happen to be 2-3. The Falcons should have been the get-right game. It should have been the tune-up. It was close, but it wasn't clean enough. We only saw Marcus Mariota pass for a $147. But that 147 passing yards is kind of indicative of what Marcus Mariota's been doing all season. So did they hold Marcus Mariota? If you go through the passing yardage for the Falcons this season, 215, 171, 207, 131, and 110. If you go through that, that doesn't really add up, right? 110 was incorrect, Pro Football Reference, for the record. It's 147. But regardless of the fact, Marcus Mariota has not passed for over 205 yards at any point in the season. Whether that's by design or, whether that's just not having the weapons, the chemistry, whatever. But did the Buccaneers defense really hold Marcus Mariota to 147 passing yards? I don't think they did. Atlanta's a run-first team with or without Cordero Patterson. Realistically, worried about the Steelers. I hope that there's a convincing win. I want this to be a get-right game for Luke Gedeke. That's what I really want it to be. I want Luke Gedeke to line up against Cam Hayward and hold his own and get into that right frame of mind and get over the hump and get to the point, because you can only imagine what's going through this kid's mind right now of, man, I'm just getting my ass handed to me week after week by these all-pros, by these Pro Bowlers. When is it going to stop? When am I finally going to be able to get my footing? All it takes is that one time. All it takes is him lining up from Cam Hayward and holding his own, and now we're talking about a completely different offensive line. Because Shaq Mason, Brandon Walton, Robert Hainsey, Tristan Wirfs, they're all holding their own. They're all doing well. The problem is they're getting past Luke Gedeke, which is also in turn hurting Robert Hainsey as well. You know, you've got two inexperienced guys lined up next to each other and hoping for the best. That's where we are right now with the offensive line. Could they have tried to make a trade? Sure. But, you know, if we're being totally realistic, who could they have traded for? Offensive linemen, while they're very underappreciated, they come at a premium if you're trying to get them in the trade market. You don't see offensive linemen ever really traded. It's always the skill position players that are traded, because there's a premium for a good offensive lineman. So I'm hopeful that Luke Gedeke can hold his own against Cam Hayward this weekend as they head towards the Carolina Panthers, which should realistically be the time where the Buccaneers figure everything out and get all of it clicking. That, to me, is where that needs to happen, because then you've got Thursday night against the Ravens. That's not going to be easy. And then you've got Sunday afternoon against the Rams. And then you're traveling to Germany to play the Seahawks, who are very much overachieving and playing very well this season. I'm not necessarily as worried about the Seahawks, because largely in part, we know that these overseas games are always a kind of a different beast, right? We know that, you know, but I'm not necessarily worried about the Seahawks, but I am worried about the Steelers. I'm not worried about the Panthers at all. I think that we need to continue to trend forward in certain areas against the Steelers and then just click all of it together against the Panthers. You know, the Bengals, by the time we see them in week 15, might be a different beast. They might finally have gotten it all together. The 49ers, we know how well the 49ers are playing. You know, the Cardinals will be fully, Christmas is a long time from now, but the Cardinals will have DeAndre Hopkins back. AJ Green will be there. Kyler Murray will have his number one. Zach Ertz is still there. There's a lot of positives going for the Arizona Cardinals heading into the latter half of the season. We know the Saints are always tough. Excuse me. We know the Saints are always tough. And by the way, we play them on a Monday night game. You know, Tom Brady finally got his first regular season victory over the Saints this year. Will he get his second? Hopefully. But also, Tom Brady against the Saints in prime time has been even worse. So there's all of these storylines and all of these things into the season. And this was the 3-game stretch that I thought the Buccaneers needed to make things look right, to make their adjustments. And let's hope that that's what they do as we head into Sunday. Make sure you are tuned in to Channelside Bets live exclusively on our YouTube page at 11:30. Get all of your fantasy and DFS tips and advice. Make sure you follow Channelside Bets on the Twitter machine. Evan, Nikki, and Chip do a great job. I won a few bucks based off of some of their predictions and projections. So, I mean, hey, check it out. Get your DFS lineup set up, and same for your seasonal fantasy leagues as well. Make sure you are following Channelside on all of these social media platforms. Never miss a moment from Tampa's next generation of sports talk. That's going to do it for us this week. I will see you on Monday. Everybody have a happy Friday. Enjoy the Sunday slate of games. Go Buccaneers. Look for that matchup of Luke Gedeke and Cameron Hayward. But don't get too discouraged if it doesn't go well. That's going to do it for us. Happy Friday. I'll see you all again on Monday. Don't forget, check out Channelside Bets Sunday at 11:30 on our YouTube page.